Hi. If you're like me, you probably know that headhunting has come around, and there are plenty of characters to be excited about, to get your hands on, pull for, etc. that have evaded you for a long time. But before you actually choose who you want to commit to, or who will be your, your choice for the headhunting 5-star challenge, there is something to consider that a fellow content creator brought up, and I do think is pretty important. The first is that, well, there's going to be a new coin shop in approximately 20 days, as per what we see in the shop. If you aren't familiar with it, the Galaxy coin shop is something that some players, balance or schedule around specifically in case if, there's another set that ends up getting shown. And in this case, there is actually a pretty reasonable, it is pretty reasonable to suggest to wait before this gets, well, adjusted or refreshed to see who you have access to after. If not, well, the character's on screen right now. Now, if all you had to worry about was this, then okay, honestly, coin shop may not be something that a lot of players have access to. But the next thing that I think was also really important and that he made aware of, and by the way, if it wasn't obvious, it was Tristan, the GOAT. Tristan also suggested that, well, according to cycles, and according to the way that epicseven typically releases, there will also be a new, well, balance patch that also arrives coming up soon. Now, there are many reasons to, well, wait on pulling for a headhunt now, and if you're just re-rolling through when you have dupes and stuff, that's okay. And for the most part, I don't think players should be too far along in it. I don't think it's at the point where we can even confirm it. If it is or isn't, regardless, that's not the point. I would definitely hold off locking in your choices, though, because, well, the changes that they've introduced to the game right now are pretty significant. And now I will be the first to say that, roughly a month ago or so, I would have never thought that Arena looked like the way that it looks right now. There are Ilanov and Ruel and Mortz and Flans and all these different weird looking team compositions that are a stark difference to what the meta and what Arena and even Guild War looked like in the past. If we take a look at even, well, what the past Guild Wars that we've encountered or some of the defenses from some of my guildmates look like. Sorry, we're fighting against a very low ranked guild right now. But like, even if you take a look at the defenses that we have going on here, you've got Ilanov, you've got Broman, all these weird Harsetti teams, and the meta looks, generally speaking, very different. Even LRK and Mort making a resurgence. All that being said, I do want to now bring up basically a tier list that I made formerly with another content creator and also my editor, God Doggos. Thank you again to all these fantastic individuals. Apologies, I'm opening this up real quick. I want to talk about, well, where my placement for the tier list was prior. This Moonlight hero recruitment tier list was pretty spot on, and I don't think that there's much change in terms of where I would place some of these characters. However, the characters that I didn't include for the recently buffed are, well, all these characters down here. Now, let me start this off, I should say, by rating a lot of these characters. Twisted Eidolon Kayron, okay, probably not the most amazing, to be honest. He's average. I'm sure you can find a niche situation where you can use him. Spez is kind of in a similar position. The changes for him are decent, and even for Arena, you could use him in a manual team, and I'll get to that in a little bit. But realistically, he's probably still hovering in the B2C range. By the way, this is for overall PvP. This is not just for Arena or Guild War or anything, which is why I do think he's also quite low. Silverblade Araminta actually is probably in a similar position where she's pretty good in certain Guild War and certain Arena matches. But the honest truth is that she could honestly go from up and down from B to C any day of the week. And now we have what I consider to be one of the GOATs of the game now. This Ruel character is disgusting. If you guys have seen her, a lot of people have been experimenting with her builds, and she is, I'm going to say it, probably one of the strongest characters in the game, and one of the most frustrating characters that I've ever had the displeasure of playing against. But I understand it's been years since she's been played, and she got completely, power crept and thrown off board by, well, characters like Destina. She's fine in S. I understand. Det Dealer Ray had a similar stint where he was completely unplayable. Dilibit, I also think, is almost in that S to A range, where she's quite powerful. She does her job absolutely fantastically. She is much more difficult to manipulate as opposed to maybe some character like Dragon King Sharoon or even some of the other characters on this list, though she does still end up getting a bit pincered or kind of losing a little bit to characters like Politis and normal Politis. And then finally, I actually think Last Rider Crow is also fantastic. I'm debating whether or not putting him at the bottom of S or top of A, because I've seen a lot of people use Last Rider Crow not only in arena defenses, but also in offenses, while also being in Guild Wars, while also being Guild War defenses or Guild War offense and defense. And even RTA, I've been seeing people play, well, Last Rider Crow and Laya together so that you can get Laya's S3 off really fast, and you also decrease everyone's cooldowns extremely fast too. Overall, this character is really strong, and honestly, in terms of the winners from the Moonlight section of the patch, it really feels like Ruel and Last Rider Crow are really, really impactful. Now, this wasn't supposed to just talk about these new characters and show you this tier list, because, to be honest, this tier list looks okay, but as with all balance patches and as with all metas, time needs to pass for us to adjust and see what ends up getting adjusted, or to kind of time needs to pass for us to really find or figure out what the meta is going to be. And because we're in a weird spot where technically like Emma Lua just came out and people aren't sure if she's good or not, this is an okay, I think, tentative list to kind of judge overall PvP for. However, of course, there are certain changes and this may fluctuate a little bit depending on rank. That is not the entire point of me showing this tier list off, however, because again, it should, or this tier list in general should be a good indicator for just how fluctuating or how what's the word? I guess volatile the meta can be. Because again, if you were to go look at other tier lists, I'm sure from maybe a month, 2, or even 3 months ago, this would look completely different. You would have many characters that, again, well, aside from the not available characters, of course, but there would be a lot of characters here that would fluctuate up and down. Maybe you would have Arbiter Vildred even lower. Maybe you have someone like Spectre Nebula higher. You have Solitaria a little bit higher. Honestly, I would actually almost put Solitaria in the A rank right now because of how good she is against Flan. But okay, I'll move her. But with that being said, I'm not really adjusting too much in terms of the tier list right now. Although again, and as you're seeing right now, even from when I made this tier list with God Doggos a while ago, it didn't really matter too much, or like not much had actually changed in the meta quite yet. But now with the introduction of Flan and the popularity of new characters, well, now actually, yeah, Solitaria pretty good, pretty solid against Afternoon Soak Flan. Yeah, Dilibit pretty good, and she's finally got her placement. And yeah, like the characters that you're seeing right now that have gone up or gone down are pretty much where they are. Like nothing else has really changed too much, but again, a good sense or a good indicator for the fact that, well, the game can change on basically on dime's notice. But now I do want to talk about well, where you know, I'm personally seeing the most change or the most difficulty in terms of, I guess, the overall gameplay right now, and that's with, of course, Arena. Arena has its own list of issues that I'm not going to go into, but in terms of what you're seeing right now, there are a lot of teams that you can deal with, and one of the reasons why I wanted to bring up Arena is because there are actually some teams that I think are quite powerful right now that also may influence who you pick for your selector. Now, for me particularly, or for me specifically, the team that I struggle the most with is, well, these teams up at the top. If you're seeing this team at the top here, this Bellion, Ilanov, Last Rider Crow, Ruel team, this team is a pain. Really, it is one of the most annoying teams that I've ever dealt with. And for me, it feels like there's some random RNG that I'll have to deal with, but I have a couple teams to suggest in case you're struggling against, well, some of these different team compositions and exactly when you can use them. So the first team that I want to bring up, not against the team that you're seeing right now, the team that I have, or I'm seeing right here, is a little bit different, but it's actually a team, or I guess against a tankier like Last Rider Crow or Bellion team. I actually kind of recommend running a team with Alencia. Now, of course, my Alencia is not super well geared right now, and you can change out a few options here depending on what you're looking for, but having a Mediator Cowrick to give yourself of course, immunity and stack buffs and also give yourself defense is really nice for Alencia. Generally speaking, Alencia is run in a very slow team composition with Prayer Solitude. Just to kind of give you like an idea of what exactly you'd be looking for too, you're looking for something similar to this where you are all max, max HP, and you have a load of defense, and you have a load of crit damage, something to this effect. And well, of course, I'm missing it, but you get the idea. You can be this on pen with a little bit of fluctuation to stats, but this is a really good idea if you're struggling specifically against the, well, big, bulky team compositions. The other team composition that you actually might have just saw here was actually a team composition that involved Solitaria, and, well, I actually really like this team, specifically for when you see teams that have, well, you know what, for the sake of this, I'll just reset it so that you guys can see exactly what I'm talking about. But if you've ever seen a team composition that has, well, someone like this team composition specifically with Flan, and you have Ruel and you have Ilanov, giving yourself a Solitaria or a more tanky Solitaria actually does pretty well. And this is part of the reason why I think she actually has a higher placement for me specifically on the tier list post-update. But again, good reason for you to wait and see if they end up changing, the balance patch, or if they add a character to the balance patch that ends up looking really cool. Because even from the eye test that people had mentioned, or the eye test that people gave to characters like Mort and Ruel, when their balance patch was first announced, they ended up being super impactful characters. And look at it, you're seeing the product of it right now. There are now very many, or several, Ruel meta defenses that are flying around. But the team composition that you're seeing right here, again, has Solitaria. I think this is a pretty good reason for you to put her up. If you want to use her on Crown or something, that also works. But the idea here is to be very tanky, and of course I'm tuned to Harsetti teams, and I'm fighting a Harsetti Afternoon Soak Flan's team specifically so I don't die. That is also the way that a lot of my characters are tuned. If you haven't seen this already, well, I've got the Empyrean Ilanov, and she's got like a bunch of HP, and she's also damaged with Rise of a Monarch. The Mediator Cowrick, she's just all HP basically with Sweet Miracle. You could also be on Candlestick if you want for this, assuming you don't deal with too many debuffs. And the final, the final character that we have here is the Flan, specifically because you want to do a lot of damage. And even if you don't have her own artifact at max, which I agree is kind of difficult to do, for the most part, for teams like this, it's actually quite fine or quite nice to actually have Bloodstone on. Now, I included those two teams because honestly, those are the teams that I suffer the most from right now. But even if you were to, for instance, decide to swap out the Solitaria here, if you're ever just encountering a Mort or a Mortelix team, actually putting in the Death Dealer Ray here works wonders as well. Like if you're taking a look at some of the other, I guess I don't really see any Mort teams right now, but in case you're seeing Mort wherever you are, the Death Dealer Ray actually performs quite well too, specifically because, well, obviously, they have a lot of health and they have a lot of tankiness, and that allows you to shred through it quickly in case if you, of course, are fighting Mort specifically. Part of the reason why, on a side note, I don't particularly enjoy picking something like the Alencia team against Mort as well is because, well, sometimes your Alencia might get defense broken or things of this nature, and you need to start picking up the pace quite fast, and you want to kill quite quickly. Although, I will say that Alencia has shown to still win into Mort if you end up fighting against him. Now, the final team composition that I want to talk about is a actual Spez manual team, and it's pretty good specifically against Ruel teams. You might not want to do this in certain cases where they have characters like Bloodblade Karen and they have too much debuffing. But if you are fighting, let's say, a team composition, let's find another one. Let's say you're fighting a team composition like this specifically, I actually find Spez to be quite good because, well, you are likely going to be taking someone like Death Dealer Ray anyways. And for Death Dealer Ray, with the team composition that you're seeing here, the Specimen Sez can, well, extinction any character that he wants. And in most cases, extincting and sleeping is more than enough for any characters on this team to, well, die. And again, it might be a little bit sus at times if you're trying to deal with, a Harsetti that stuns your whole team. And there are certain cases where the S1ing from certain characters will end up killing someone like Specimen Sez. But if you're able to, again, guarantee a kill, or if you don't fight too many weird Ruel, one-shot teams, or if you don't fight any flan team that specifically threatens your Spez, you can actually use them to quite good effect, especially if you're just sick and tired of her reviving, because, my god, all the prophetic candlesticks are so frustrating to fight against. But, okay, that was the final slow team composition that I wanted to talk about. And it could be a reason for you to, hey, maybe take someone like Deathly Ray if you weren't going to before, or hey, maybe you'll take someone like, I don't know, like a Solitaria if you want to run the other team. All of these are completely viable options, but as I fix my team, there is one final team that I want to talk about that I do think is very experimental, and it does have to do with the arena, and it's more of a treat. If you don't want to do this, that's okay, that's totally fine. But I still have a bit of a vouch for Briarwitch Iceria being one of the best characters in the game right now, and that's specifically because of what she does against, well, you guessed it, Ruel. Now, as you're seeing on screen right now, the team that we have is very interesting looking. I have Flan, I have Briarwitch Iceria, and I have Sid. Now, this might look a little bit suspect because, well, you have to make sure that the Harsetti isn't fast, but assuming that you have a specific tuning for, well, this team that I have on the left, it actually ends up doing really well against the Ilanov Ruel LRK team. I have been experimenting with it a little bit against some of the Flan teams, but this is a team that one of the higher, I believe that the rank 2 player in Arena was using to cleave some players, and it looks really interesting, but it is extremely gear intensive for speed. Now, to give you a rundown exactly of what the stats look like for this team, 4K 300, nothing special. And to be clear as well, for the other teams and the other compositions that you saw here, including Spez and Solitaria, most of them are just low speed, and maybe they have lifesteal or destruction, so it doesn't look too crazy. As you see here with the Spez 2, by the way, just on crit set, it's on lifesteal and base speed. But for the team composition that you're seeing right here, the speed does matter quite a bit. My Harsetti is actually on a fast build now. She is 301. And I want her, well, to be able to debuff, and I have her on Crown. And as you'll see in a moment, as I parse through the units, you'll understand why I kind of want these stat lines. I've got a high effectiveness Wandering Prince Sid, and I've also got, I've got a character, or I've got Flan on her own artifact specifically, so she can do a load of damage. But the idea behind this team composition is that you have a couple books, you have a lot of S1s, and you have a lot of defense breaks. And this, alongside the inability to revive from Briar, makes this quite helpful. And if this is a slow Harsetti, for instance, which, let's be honest, guys, in 99% of cases it is, this Harsetti will actually take 2 whole turns against the enemy team, which could be really impactful, especially with the way that Flan works. Without further ado, though, the other ones would take a little bit long, and I don't want this to be another 50-minute video. Let me show you exactly what we're cooking up here. So, with the team that you're seeing, again, this is a fairly common team composition, I'd say. As you're seeing, an extremely slow team composition. We run the S3 here, and this should push back the Harsetti with Sid. Cool, very good. Perfect, we push back. Now we have the Sid who gets to S3, and the tuning, by the way, will kind of change how you play this composition out, but this team actually has quite a high, it does actually have a lot of value, and there's actually a decent amount of, there's like a pretty good win con specifically for this team that you're seeing right now. But as you're seeing, look, we've already got the revives, everyone is, sleeping and stunned, and you might be a little bit worried about like the state of my team right now, but actually, as you're seeing on screen right now, because of exactly how much damage I did, or because of your, all the debuffing that I applied with all the soul burns and how many debuffs you're stacking here, it's actually pretty unlikely for them to even, well, get rid of, the stun, which in most cases is probably near the end of the debuff list. But even if that's not the case, you can always end up killing with, well, an S1 from your Harsetti. And look, I'm literally lapping this team here, right? Like, I could have just killed the Harsetti earlier. I could have killed the Ruel, who probably would have just S1'd herself. And it looks honestly pretty convincing, right? Bunch of defense breaks, bunch of Flan S1s. The game's over in about, I don't know, maybe 30 seconds to a minute. which in my opinion feels a little bit better than what I was doing before, which is, well, against some of these team compositions, I would run a Frida cleave, which makes me so frustrated because if they're like different speed tuning, it really sucks. And if the Ilanov resists me, it's even worse. But this is another team that you could run where it's a full damage Briar, a full damage BBK, and you have Book on Zeo for Frida to one-shot. Now, again, for these two cleaves, though, I do want a disclaimer that both of these cannot be picked in most cases against Bellion because it's very suspect. But apologies, guys. Again, this video was mostly just supposed to be a PSA because, well, balance changes are coming out. I also wanted to show you some of my frustration with Arena. Apologies for that, but it may, if you're doing Arena, it may convince you to change your picks otherwise. But again, balance patch should be slated to come out in 10 to 12 days. I believe it's not this Friday, but the Friday following's Friday morning, I believe, is when we should be getting balance patch. If not, maybe a little bit earlier. If they decide to change things randomly, apologies. Smoggy just does it like that sometimes. And otherwise, again, the coin shop cooldown, as you're seeing right here, has 18 days to it. You know, this is just for headhunt, though. Like, you know, this coin shop also changes in 18 days. Not that important. Anyway, so guys, that's going to be it for this video. Thanks again for watching. Appreciate all the support you guys have been giving me. And yeah, make sure to, well, avoid this mistake. Yeah. Anyways, that's going to be it for this video. I'll see you guys all next time. Make sure to check out the rest of my socials. I'll see you in the next video. Bye-bye. See ya. Bye-bye.